Every town has a dark side. It's easy to walk through your neighborhood, enjoy the sights, and think everything is just as it appears. But beneath the surface, every place has a secret, something hidden in the shadows that most people don't want to acknowledge. Every so often, a case will come along that pulls at you, one that stands out, making you feel uneasy in ways you can't quite explain. It's not just about the details, the facts, or even the evidence. It's a gut feeling, a deep sense that something is wrong, that despite all the information collected and the thorough investigations, the full truth hasn't been revealed. You start to wonder if someone, perhaps even several people, are hiding something. And this exact feeling is what you'll find in the tragic case of Lindsay Buziak. If you want to keep digging into the unknown and uncover more stories like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell now so you never miss a mystery. Lindsay was a young woman with a promising future. She had big dreams and was on the verge of making them come true. But tragically, her life was cut short in a shocking way, murdered in broad daylight. What makes this case even more disturbing is how unusual the crime was. It wasn't just any typical murder. This was a case that raised so many questions, and despite the hours of police work, no answers have ever come. There were theories, there were leads, but nothing concrete. And as you'll see, even after all these years, the mystery of who killed Lindsay Buziak remains unsolved. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Every Town. Today we're going to travel up north to Canada and explore one of the most chilling, haunting, and perplexing unsolved murders in the country. We're diving into the case of Lindsay Buziak, a young real estate agent with a bright future who was killed under strange circumstances. The investigation has been ongoing for years, but no one can say for sure who did it or why. There are many theories, but no definitive answers. It's almost as if the case is haunted by the unanswered questions. So let's head over to Victoria, British Columbia, and take a closer look at one of Canada's most unnerving and still unresolved murders. What happened to Lindsay Buziak is a mystery that will leave you wondering how a crime so violent and brutal could go unsolved for so long. Stay tuned, because once you learn the details of this case, you'll be left asking, how is this still unsolved? After graduating high school, Lindsay Buziak was determined to make a name for herself in the world of real estate. Unlike many of her peers who were unsure of what they wanted to do with their lives, Lindsay had a clear vision from the start. She knew exactly what she wanted. She was going to work in real estate, and nothing was going to stop her. Lindsay wasn't like many young people who float through life without a sense of direction. She had a focused drive, and it was clear to everyone who knew her that she was going to succeed. With this in mind, Lindsay set off to pursue her dream by enrolling in the University of British Columbia's prestigious Sauder School of Business. This was the beginning of her journey into the competitive world of real estate. While attending the program, Lindsay quickly demonstrated a natural aptitude for real estate. She enrolled in the Real Estate Trading Services program, which would prepare her for a successful career in the industry. But she didn't stop there. Lindsay knew that in order to succeed, she needed to build connections, to network with the right people, and to learn from those who had already made it. It was during this time that she found a mentor, Helen Jones, a successful real estate tutor who offered workshops designed to help aspiring agents get a foot in the door. These workshops weren't just about learning the basics of real estate. They were a place to meet potential clients, to socialize, and to network with other aspiring agents. It was here that Lindsay made one of the most important connections of her young life. At one of these workshops, Lindsay met Jason Zio, a charming young man whose family was deeply embedded in the real estate business. Jason's family, particularly his mother, Shirley, had a well-established firm, and Lindsay could immediately tell that Jason had the connections and insight that would be crucial for her success. They hit it off right away, and their professional relationship quickly turned into something more personal. Their bond was undeniable, and before long, they were dating. Jason had his own successes and his own life to lead. But there was something about Lindsay that made him feel like everything was falling into place. They were a power couple in the making, both working towards their goals in the real estate industry. The two of them had been together for nearly a year by the time Lindsay's career really started to take off. In June of 2006, Lindsay achieved a major milestone that would set her apart from many of her peers. She passed her real estate exam and became one of the youngest agents in the Greater Victoria area. At just 24 years old, she was already one of only 20 agents under the age of 25 in the region. This was no small feat, and it was clear that Lindsay had the talent, the drive, and the passion to succeed in real estate. Around this time, Lindsay and Jason officially became a couple. Their relationship was blossoming, and with Lindsay's career taking off, everything seemed to be falling into place. Not long after passing her real estate exam, Lindsay secured a position at Maverick, a well-known real estate agency. She worked at Maverick for about a year and a half, gaining valuable experience, learning the ins and outs of the business, and building her reputation as a trusted agent. But Lindsay didn't settle for mediocrity. She continued to push herself forward, looking for new opportunities that would help her grow. In late 2007, she made another significant career move. She joined Remax Kasem, a well-respected firm managed by none other than Jason's mother, Shirley. It was a big move for Lindsay, joining a firm with such close ties to Jason's family, but she was confident it was the right decision for her career. The decision to join Remax Kasem proved to be a good one. Lindsay quickly showed her skill and commitment, handling several high-profile property transactions with ease. She was a natural at what she did, and it didn't take long for her to make a significant impact. In fact, in her short time at Remax Kasem, Lindsay managed to close 8 property transactions, generating a staggering $3.2 million in gross revenue. Her ability to close deals, her dedication to her clients, and her innate understanding of the real estate market made her stand out in a crowded field. And just as her career was taking off, so was her relationship with Jason. The two of them moved in together, sharing a life filled with promise and possibility. At one point, Jason's mother, Shirley, purchased an expensive waterfront property, and the couple moved in. Everything seemed to be falling into place for Lindsay. She had a successful career, a loving boyfriend, and a future that looked brighter than ever. At just 24, Lindsay was on top of the world. Jason, at 27, was by her side, and their future seemed incredibly promising. They were both young, driven, and living in a beautiful home by the water, a far cry from where they had started just a few years earlier. But little did they know, this perfect life was about to take a tragic turn. In late January of 2008, Lindsay's career as a real estate agent was truly starting to take off. She was working with high-value clients, showing impressive properties, and becoming known in the Victoria area as a rising star in the real estate world. But with her success came new challenges. One of those challenges came on the afternoon of February 2, 2008, when Lindsay received a mysterious call that would alter the course of her life forever. The call came from a woman who was seeking to purchase a home with her husband. The woman's accent struck Lindsay as unusual, but what was even more unsettling was the name the woman provided. Later, it would turn out to be fake. At first, Lindsay didn't think much of it. Clients with strange accents weren't uncommon in real estate, and she had dealt with plenty of unusual situations before. But something about this call made Lindsay uneasy. There was something off about the way the woman spoke, and the fact that she was asking for a showing at such short notice raised more red flags. Despite these concerns, Lindsay did what she had been trained to do. She took the lead seriously and set up an appointment to show the property. What made the situation even more suspicious was the fact that this woman had reached out to Lindsay directly on her personal cell phone. In 2008, it wasn't typical for real estate agents to give out their personal numbers to random callers. It was an odd choice, especially considering Lindsay was still a relatively junior agent at the time. The caller claimed to have been referred by a former client, but when Lindsay asked for more details, the woman seemed to become evasive. Still, Lindsay's instincts told her that something wasn't quite right. Even though the caller had a budget of $1 million, enough to make any agent's ears perk up, Lindsay was cautious. As a young agent, it was crucial for her to build her career, but she also had to be smart and protect herself. Lindsay didn't ignore her gut feeling. She brought up her concerns with Jason, her boyfriend, and with his father. She said, "Something's weird about this. I don't feel comfortable about this whole thing." She confided that the woman on the phone had sounded strange and that her gut was telling her something was wrong. Jason, however, was pragmatic about the situation. He encouraged her to go ahead with the showing. The commission she stood to earn was considerable, $50,000 for a $1 million property, and he thought it would be a good step for her to gain more experience, even if the whole situation felt a bit off. After all, this was a prime opportunity for Lindsay to build her reputation, and in real estate, every lead counted. Jason also offered to go with her to the showing. He wanted to make sure she felt safe, and as a former semi-pro hockey player, his imposing presence was something he thought would offer her an extra layer of protection. Lindsay initially hesitated, but after some convincing, she agreed that Jason could come along. After all, it would give her peace of mind, and she'd never been one to back down from a challenge. Lindsay did her due diligence, researching the property and confirming the details with the client. She eventually found a home that she thought would be a perfect match for the mysterious couple, 1702 D'Souza Place, a newly built property that had a lot of appeal. She scheduled the showing for 5:30 p.m. on Saturday, February 2, 2008. It was a beautiful day in Victoria, and everything seemed to be falling into place. However, as the day wore on, Lindsay's unease grew. She briefly stopped by the RE/MAX office in the afternoon to check in and voice her concerns to a receptionist and a couple of other realtors. She confided in them, saying she didn't feel entirely comfortable with the situation. Despite her friends offering to accompany her, Lindsay declined. She assured them that Jason would be there with her, and after all, he was her boyfriend, and he was an intimidating presence at 6'3" and 240 pounds. She felt that with Jason there, she'd be safe, and that everything would be fine. At around 4:24 p.m., Lindsay and Jason met for a late lunch at Sauce, a restaurant they often visited. Jason recalled Lindsay eating quickly and seeming visibly on edge. She wasn't her usual calm self. Jason tried to calm her nerves, suggesting that he could go to the showing with her, but Lindsay didn't want to seem overprotective or like she couldn't handle the situation on her own. Deep down, though, she was clearly anxious. She ate quickly, anxious to get to the property. Jason was concerned but didn't push the issue further. He simply reminded her that he'd be there as soon as he could. After their lunch, they parted ways. Lindsay went home to change into a more professional outfit, and they planned to meet at the property in about an hour. While Lindsay was getting ready, Jason went to SHC Autographics, an auto repair shop, to pick up a friend named Cohen Oman. Jason was running behind schedule, and as the time ticked on, Lindsay's worry only deepened. She sent several text messages to Jason, asking where he was, but he was tied up picking up Cohen. It was clear that Lindsay was becoming more anxious, but she continued to tell herself that everything would be fine. She had Jason on his way, and she was doing her job. At 5:29 p.m., Lindsay arrived at the property at 1702 D'Souza Place and accessed the real estate lockbox, which indicated that she was on site. As she waited for the clients, a sense of unease still lingered. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, but she told herself it was just the nerves. She checked her phone, feeling comforted by the few text messages from Jason, reassuring her that he would be there soon. Little did she know, this seemingly routine showing was about to become something far darker. The day of the showing, February 2, 2008, was a crisp Saturday in Victoria. Lindsay's mind was racing. She had an uneasy feeling about the whole situation. Something about the way the client had contacted her, the strange accent, the urgency, and the weirdness of the whole thing just didn't sit right with her. She was a young agent, eager to prove herself, but deep down she felt the weight of the unknown. She had confided in her colleagues at the RE/MAX office earlier that day, and even though they offered to accompany her, she politely declined. Jason, her boyfriend, had assured her he would be there, and she found comfort in that. Still, as she pulled up to the property at 1702 D'Souza Place, her gut was telling her something wasn't right. Lindsay arrived at the property around 5:29 p.m. She accessed the real estate lockbox, which indicated that she had arrived at the house. The property at 1702 D'Souza Place was part of a newly developed cul-de-sac with 4 homes, nestled off Torquay Drive just north of Victoria. It was a nice, quiet area, not too isolated, but enough to offer some privacy. The house she was showing was still under construction, which added another layer of complexity. It wasn't finished yet, but it was close. The surroundings were calm, and the fact that the builders and workers had already left for the day gave the place an almost eerie quiet. Lindsay was standing in the driveway, looking out for the clients, when she noticed something unsettling. 2 independent witnesses, passing by in their car at approximately 5:30 p.m., reported seeing a couple walking into the cul-de-sac. One of the witnesses later recalled seeing a man in a long coat, while both of them mentioned seeing Lindsay greet the couple in the driveway. There was nothing overtly suspicious about the couple at first glance, but the timing of their arrival felt off. The couple seemed to be walking towards the property, just as Lindsay was expecting them. And yet, the sense of unease was growing stronger with every passing minute. As Lindsay was waiting outside, she texted Jason again, confirming that she had arrived and would be meeting the clients shortly. Jason, who had been running behind, responded with an apology. He reassured her that he was on his way, but he was stuck picking up Cohen Oman, a friend who had been waiting at the auto repair shop, SHC Autographics. Jason told her that he would be at the property soon, in about 10 to 15 minutes. But it didn't offer Lindsay the same comfort that it would have on any other day. There was something different about today. Something in the air that made her feel like she wasn't in control. The tension in her body was palpable. As she waited, Lindsay saw the couple walk into the house and disappear from view. The man wore a long coat, and the woman, who was said to have been with him, was dressed in an equally strange manner. Lindsay was trained to stay professional, to brush off any initial hesitation, but this was no ordinary real estate showing. Even the simplest actions felt like they were fraught with danger. Meanwhile, Jason had arrived at SHC Autographics, but Cohen was running late too. It wasn't until 5:30 p.m. that the pair finally left together, and Jason began heading to the house. His plan was simple. He would meet Lindsay, ensure she was safe, and if there was anything strange about the situation, he would handle it. He didn't want to seem too overbearing or suspicious, so he tried to keep a low profile. Jason drove through the cul-de-sac and parked across the street, trying to stay out of sight, giving Lindsay some space to handle the showing herself. However, as soon as the couple noticed his car, they turned around and went back into the house. Jason found this behavior odd. Why would they act so suddenly evasive? He waited for a bit, watching the house. He didn't want to look like the controlling boyfriend, but there was a feeling in his gut that something wasn't quite right. Jason waited for about 10 minutes. The couple had disappeared back into the house, and he felt like enough time had passed for them to be comfortable. He decided to drive back into the cul-de-sac and park closer to the property. His thought process was simple. He didn't want to appear as a nosy boyfriend, but he also wanted to keep a watchful eye on things. It was better to be safe than sorry, especially with how nervous Lindsay had been earlier. He parked closer to the property, still out of the way, but within view of the front door. Jason sat there for a few more minutes. He was still waiting to hear from Lindsay, but she hadn't texted him again. It was strange. She always kept in touch. Still, he wasn't sure whether he should walk up to the house or wait for her to call him over. He sat there, growing more uncomfortable by the minute. Finally, after sitting in his car for about 10 more minutes, Jason decided to go up to the front door and check on things. By now, it was 6:05 p.m., and still no word from Lindsay. Jason knocked on the door and rang the bell, but there was no answer. The silence was almost deafening. He stood there, growing more suspicious. Something didn't feel right. When Jason looked through the glass panels of the door, he noticed something alarming. Lindsay's high-heeled shoes were sitting at the entrance, completely out of place. This was unusual. Why would Lindsay leave her shoes behind, especially when she had been expecting clients? It struck him immediately that something was wrong. The dread that had been building in his stomach throughout the evening turned into panic. Jason immediately called 911, telling them that his girlfriend was inside the home and he couldn't get in. He said he was worried, that something didn't feel right, and that he needed help. Jason and Cohen rushed around the back of the house, trying to find another way in. But the basement door was locked. They were trapped outside, with no way of knowing what was going on inside. Jason's anxiety grew with every second. He finally returned to the front of the house and peeked over the fence. That's when he saw the patio door, partially open. Without hesitation, Jason helped Cohen jump over the fence and into the yard. Together they scrambled to the front door and managed to get inside. Jason ran upstairs, his heart pounding. What he found when he reached the master bedroom was the last thing he ever expected to see. Lindsay was lying on her back, motionless, in a pool of her own blood. The horror of that moment will forever be burned into his memory. Jason ran to her side, trying to revive her with CPR, but it was no use. He could tell, even before the paramedics arrived, that she was already gone. He immediately called 911 again, his voice shaking as he reported the discovery. It was only moments before the sirens were heard in the distance, and the police arrived at the scene. Lindsay was pronounced dead shortly after paramedics arrived, but the brutality of her death had already become evident. She had been stabbed 40 times. The viciousness of the attack indicated a personal motive, or at least a level of rage that was hard to comprehend. What was even more unsettling was the fact that Lindsay had no defensive wounds. This suggested that she had been attacked from behind, completely unaware of what was about to happen. None of Lindsay's personal belongings had been taken, and there was no sign of sexual assault. It seemed like the attack had been carefully planned, and yet there was no obvious reason why anyone would want to kill her. The mystery deepened with every piece of evidence that didn't add up. As Jason stood in the doorway of the master bedroom, the image before him was nothing short of horrifying. Lindsay was lying there, lifeless, her body sprawled out in a pool of blood. The brutal reality of what had happened struck him like a punch to the stomach. He couldn't comprehend what had just occurred. One moment, he had been texting her, reassuring her that he was on his way, and now here she was, dead. He immediately rushed to her side, instinctively attempting to perform CPR, but it was already too late. Jason knew, the moment he touched her cold skin, that she was gone. He didn't need to be a medical professional to understand that. The overwhelming sense of helplessness washed over him as he called 911 once more, his voice trembling as he told the dispatcher what had happened. "She's gone," he said, a desperate plea for help echoing through his words. Within minutes, sirens could be heard in the distance, signaling the arrival of the police and paramedics. They quickly entered the house, and Lindsay's body was pronounced dead at the scene. The paramedics moved swiftly, but there was no saving her. Her death was a brutal one, with signs of a violent struggle, yet no defensive wounds. The sheer savagery of the attack suggested a level of rage or personal vendetta. Lindsay hadn't had any time to defend herself. And this fact raised an even darker question. Who would want to do this to her? As investigators began processing the scene, the details of Lindsay's death began to unfold. She had been stabbed a total of 40 times, an overwhelming number of wounds for anyone to endure. The brutality of the murder suggested a personal motive, something more than a random act of violence. The killer wasn't just trying to end her life, they were sending a message. But what was the message? Why was Lindsay chosen? Despite the savage nature of the attack, there were no signs of robbery or sexual assault. It appeared that nothing had been stolen from the property, and there were no signs of forced entry. It was as if Lindsay had been led to that house for one reason only, to be killed. And the fact that no personal items had been taken only deepened the mystery. Was this murder a carefully planned execution? Or was there something about Lindsay's life, something hidden beneath the surface, that had made her a target? Jason and his friend Cohen were taken down to the station separately for questioning. They were both visibly shaken, but they cooperated fully with the police. Jason described in great detail the events leading up to the murder, the strange phone call, the odd couple, and the anxious feelings that had been building up in Lindsay. His account of the day matched the evidence, and surveillance footage confirmed his movements. There was no evidence to suggest that Jason had anything to do with Lindsay's murder. As for Cohen, his alibi was also corroborated. The two men were released without charges, but the pain of what they had just experienced weighed heavily on them. The sense of guilt Jason felt for not being able to protect her was something he would carry with him for the rest of his life. As the investigation continued, one of the key pieces of evidence that had the police baffled was Lindsay's phone. The last time Lindsay used her phone was at 5:41 p.m., just minutes before she was killed. The call had been made to a random number in her contacts, someone she wasn't currently in communication with. Her phone had been found in her pocket, which suggested that the call may have been a pocket dial made during the attack. This detail gave investigators a small window of time in which to estimate Lindsay's time of death, which they determined to be between 5:38 p.m. and 5:42 p.m. The police traced the cell phone used by the mysterious couple, which had been purchased in late November 2007 at a convenience store in downtown Victoria. It was activated just a couple of months later, in late January 2008, just before the calls came in to Lindsay. The calls themselves were made from the West End of Victoria, and after Lindsay's death, the phone was never used again. This led investigators to believe that the murder was premeditated and carefully orchestrated. Whoever was behind the crime had gone to great lengths to cover their tracks, using disposable phones and fake names to avoid detection. The fact that the phone was never used again after Lindsay's death only added to the suspicion that this was a targeted hit, a professional job. The authorities were convinced that the killers were hired to carry out the murder, and all signs pointed to the idea that someone close to Lindsay had orchestrated the crime. The police theory was that whoever was behind the murder knew Lindsay well, perhaps even worked with her in the real estate business. This wasn't a random killing. It was a deliberate and calculated act. But the question remained, who could have wanted Lindsay dead? She was only 24, a promising young woman with a bright future ahead of her. She had no known enemies, no criminal connections, and no reason to believe she was at risk. Her family and friends were devastated by the loss, but no one could point to a specific person who might have had the motive to kill her. Several theories started to circulate. One theory suggested that Lindsay's ex-boyfriend Jason might have been involved. It was discovered that just a few weeks before her death, Lindsay had confided in her father that she was thinking about ending her relationship with Jason. She had said that being with him was a mistake, and this revelation made police question whether Jason could have had a role in her death. But there was no concrete evidence linking him to the crime, and he passed a polygraph test, further clearing his name. Another theory pointed to Jason's mother, Shirley, and the possibility that she may have been involved in shady dealings at the real estate firm. Speculation arose that Shirley and Jason had been involved in illegal activities, such as money laundering, drug trafficking, and mortgage fraud. If Lindsay had discovered something, it could have made her a threat to the family's business. Some believed that Shirley might have orchestrated the murder to silence Lindsay. But again, there was no evidence to support this theory, and Shirley denied any involvement in the case. As the investigation continued, the focus shifted to another potential lead, Lindsay's brief connection to a man named Erickson Diakazar, whom she had met while visiting Calgary in December 2007. Diakazar was later arrested in January 2008 as part of a large drug bust that led to the seizure of cocaine and cash. The timing of this arrest, just days before Lindsay's murder, raised questions about whether she had been involved with the wrong people. However, police publicly stated that Lindsay had no involvement in the drug trade, nor was she an informant. Still, the possibility that she had unknowingly crossed paths with dangerous individuals remained a haunting possibility. Despite the many theories and suspicions, no definitive answers have come to light. Was Lindsay's murder a professional job, carried out by someone she knew? Was she in the wrong place at the wrong time, the victim of a random act of violence? Or was it a personal vendetta? Someone with a motive to hurt her for reasons unknown. The case of Lindsay Buziak's murder has remained one of Canada's most haunting and puzzling unsolved mysteries. The police have made it clear that the investigation is still open and active, with detectives continuing to work on the case. However, the most recent update from the Saanich Police Department back in 2021 suggested that advancements in DNA technology had opened up some new leads. But 4 years later, those leads had yet to produce any solid evidence or arrests. The lack of closure has left Lindsay's family devastated. Her father, Jeff Buziak, has vowed to continue the search for justice. He's been outspoken about his grief, saying, "I will never quit until I find out who killed my daughter." Every year, he organizes a walk in her memory, a small group of people gathering behind Saanich City Hall to demand justice. But despite their best efforts, the case seems to have faded from the public eye, and the mystery surrounding Lindsay's murder continues to linger, unanswered. Is there corruption involved in the case? Could the Saanich Police Department be overlooking key evidence? It's a question that haunts Lindsay's family and anyone who has followed the case. One thing is for certain: Lindsay's death was a tragedy, and the fact that it remains unsolved is a tragedy in itself. The case has become a chilling reminder of how quickly life can change and how some mysteries may never be fully understood. The question of who killed Lindsay Buziak and why they got away with it in broad daylight still remains unanswered. It's a story that demands justice, but whether that justice will ever come remains uncertain. So, as the investigation continues, the question now is, what do you think? Was Lindsay's murder a carefully planned hit orchestrated by someone she knew, someone close to her, or was she simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, lured into a trap by strangers with evil intentions? The mystery endures.